Thank you very much. You gave the introduction. I don't have to do this again. I'll just say my background, sometimes I think it's nice to know what anyone's background is in this setting, is that I'm a medical doctor and a PhD student, and I will talk about the Danish registries and their role during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm not a professor, I'm not a lecturer at all. I did much of the grunt work. I did much of the programming of analysis. So just so you know why I'm here to talk about this. This will be about the registries, but also somewhat of a personal story about research. So let's go. Well, as you all know, that's why we're here in the beginning of 2020. We all heard about SARS-CoV-2, the new coronavirus. It was in China, it was far away. And suddenly, a few months later, it was everywhere. In Europe, well, I was not that puzzled. I started my paternity leave and let everyone else do their registry research. But then the French health minister tweeted this. And I won't read it up in French, but I'll tell you the gist of it was that you should not take non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, a kind of painkiller, if you experience a fever. Because there were reports from Toulouse in France that young individuals who took these ended up in the intensive care unit. You should take paracetamol. Was there much evidence for this? No. Still, it put health medicines agencies around Europe in quite a pickle. What should they do? The World Health Organization said, take paracetamol. 24 hours later, they backpedaled hard. They said, there's no evidence, take whatever you like. So, someone needed to investigate this hypothesis. Someone in Denmark, because the Danish registries, they capture NSAID use quite nicely. The over-the-counter use, which cannot be captured, is low in Denmark. So, the Danish Medicines Agency called my boss. Fair enough. My boss called me. That was the problem. My paternity leave was over. Well, so I was called in to do the grunt work, to the programming. There was just one problem. This is the curve over the number of confirmed infections in Denmark during the first year of the pandemic. And as you can see, when I was called, we were just about there. We need registered cases. We need cases with outcomes who were exposed to have any kind of statistical precision. So actually we had no cases to do the analysis. This gave us time to think. We could think about what we needed to investigate this hypothesis, which registries would be good to use, which registries were up to date. So we had time to make a plan for this study, and we also thought maybe there would come other hypotheses during this pandemic. In the beginning of the pandemic, there were many hypotheses. There was the NSAID thing, the ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers first being bad for you, then they were good. I don't think anybody exactly knows right now. And the whole hydroxychloroquine thing, which we kind of went out of the way in Denmark, so there were potential hypotheses on the way. So we sat down, we took a look at the registries. It's a different list than the one Marianne just showed you. There are a ton of national registries. We cannot cover all of them today, but these are like the most important ones for pharmacoepidemiologic research or epidemiologic research on the COVID-19 pandemic on the individual level. And on top, it's the most important one, the civil registration system. You've probably heard about it. Every Danish resident has a unique ID number, which is used to link all these registries. And normally when we talk linkage, there's always problems with database linkage. There's no problem, almost no problem whatsoever. We can link all the information. There's the National Patient Registry, which captures all hospital contacts in Denmark, related discharge diagnosis, procedures performed, very much information except for in-hospital drug use. It's theoretically updated daily, but people need to be discharged for the information to appear. So then there's the whole COVID-19 surveillance data. I don't need to talk more about this now. There's a register of medicinal products. Every prescription redeemed at a community pharmacy in Denmark is captured here. It's very good, especially if you think about drug-related hypotheses. The health insurance service register, where every time you go to a GP, it's registered, but not much more. Laboratory results, yeah, you get it. Cause of death register, also very nice. But one thing, as individuals who do observational research using national registers, we normally don't think about at all. What's this column? The update frequency. Because we had the medicines agency saying, we need information on this, we need evidence. And we were like, okay, that's nice, we'll go out there, but we need to figure on this. Still, as you can see, The worst case thing here is monthly updates, which I guess is pretty good, which in practice leads to a lag time of 1 to 3 months. But still, it was acceptable. So we had these registries, and you can say, simplifying, the National Patient Registry will oftentimes be used for outcomes, adverse events of COVID-19, hospitalization, intensive care unit admission, mechanical ventilation, and so on. And the Register of Medicinal Products was an all drug hypothesis, the basis for the exposures we were interested in. So, to finish my initial story here, we conducted a rather conservative cohort study comparing individuals who tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, who used NSAIDs, to non-users of NSAIDs, and we found no association with adverse outcomes. This was nice. The Danish Medicines Agency, I guess, was happy. And we could breathe easy. The Medicines Agency could breathe easy. And I thought, this is over, this is nice. But no. In the meantime, our study group was elevated to an expert group. We had a large group of investigators from all over the country. And this DAG-COVID was formed, which means Data Analysis Center from the Medicines Agency, COVID. And every researcher or every person in Denmark was eligible to submit hypotheses that could be investigated using these data. They should submit a hypothesis, they should submit a protocol, and if it was deemed good by a steering committee, then it was conducted. Conducted means they got help from the expert group, and practically my colleagues, some data managers, or me had to program it. So, these 11 studies were conducted in the DAG-COVID framework. I won't go through all of these. These, most oftentimes, I told you, use the Danish National Patient Registry or the Medical Statistics Medicinal Product Registry. Yeah. Nice ones to mention the ACE inhibitor angiotensin receptor blocker study, which again was quite like the NSAID study and found no adverse outcomes. Then there was a rather creative study on ABO blood type, which found a slightly beneficial effect of ABO blood type if the association is causal, I won't say. But it was a creative study. And also a study on risk of venous thromboembolism, because early on in the pandemic there were reported huge risks of thrombosis in intensive care unit patients with COVID-19. And we went out and used the Danish registries and a manual chart review of, from all infectious disease departments in Denmark to actually find what is the risk in Denmark. And it was actually not as bad as thought. Yeah, so after this, we were tired. We conducted the whole expert group, everyone was tired. We conducted many studies over the course of a year, but then we could kick back, relax, and look at some other studies from other research groups in Denmark. Yes, because what should we else do in our spare time? This is a nice example, I think, from the pharmacologists in Copenhagen, who looked at the ACTT1 trial, I guess the landmark trial for remdesivir, which showed a shortened hospital stay if you were treated with remdesivir. They took the placebo group, applied the same exclusion criteria as in the trial to the Danish National Patient Registry data, combined with EHR data from the Copenhagen region, and they compared the outcomes in the placebo group from the trial and in the real world data. So they tested the generalizability of the trial results, which I think was really nice. Also, a nice study, actually on COVID and not on COVID, is non-COVID diagnosis during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's quite intuitive. They took the incidence of different diagnoses and they plotted time series, and as you can see, during the lockdown, people didn't go to the hospital, which normalized kind of later on, but it was interesting to see what happened with other reasons to go to the hospital. Yeah, good. That was a lot of research. A year passed, everyone was tired. I was tired. But I went back, did normal PhD stuff, and went to vacation. I went vacationing. Why not? Then again, this guy, Søren Brostrøm, the director of the Danish Health Authority, I guess, went on national TV and told everyone of this AstraZeneca vaccine we're vaccinating people with. It may be associated to very rare blood clotting events. Okay, great. I think that does not have anything to do with me. So he said, no one for now is going to be vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine until we figure this out. This looks worse. So Søren, he went out and formed a large expert group of many, many epidemiologists from Denmark, which again include my boss, and by proxy me. And he asked, Christian, will you program this analysis? And I said, I guess so. So my vacation was over, but the side effect of interest, these rare clotting events, they are so rare that in our little country, Denmark, of 5 million inhabitants or more, there were too few events. So we needed to talk to our friendly neighbors in Norway. And almost everything I told you about the Danish registries right now, it's kind of the same for Norway. They have almost as nice registries in Norway, not as much look back, but they have mostly the same information. So we used information from each country's civil registration system, their vaccination registries, and the patient registries or hospital contact registries to investigate this. We performed a rather simple, the number of events observed compared to expected from the background population analysis, age and sex standardized, and found this. We investigate different arterial and venous events. As you can see, most of them, the arterial events, not so bad. But here, the cerebral venous thrombosis had a standardized morbidity ratio of 20 times greater than expected, and an absolute risk of just about 1 in 40,000 vaccinees. And we observed 7 events, and we expected 0.3 events. So this was part of, or informed the Danish Health Authority, that there may be something going on here, which also partly, I guess, led to them pulling the AstraZeneca vaccine from Denmark. So, this was the work we conducted the last 1.5 years. Again, I did much of the basic work here. I was allowed into some of the big guy meetings sometimes. But I just want to say thank you to all of these people in DAC COVID, and also later the COVID-19 vaccine investigators. Many people much more intelligent than I am who taught me a lot of stuff. So I'd like to say thank you. I was just a very little cog in a very, very, very large machine. Okay? Now, the problem, all of these very nice data I just talked to you about, they are locked in Fort Knox, kinda, so we cannot use them this weekend, too bad. But there's an alternative. I will be part of the project investigating what happened during the football championships here in Denmark and the rest of Europe. So maybe some of you will join me in this. Thank you.
Can I ask the first question?
Yeah.
I want to drill deeper on the comment of our keynote speaker today about sharing codes and repositories. How realistic is that? It's so easy to say for investigators to share their codes and repositories. In real life, everyone is holding on to, and I think that's where the bottleneck is. If everyone has to start from scratch and write the code, or wait for you to run the analysis for them, it's going to slow things down. So I'm just wondering, is the Danish culture open enough for investigators to share their codes and repositories and queries?
I would like to say yes, as I see myself on the open science bandwagon. For many of these studies I mentioned here, we open sourced the code, at least on the top of my head from the NSAID study, for example, or other of the DAC COVID studies, we released the source code. The problem is the raw data. I mean, the source code is nice, but you cannot make legally, or without doing illegal stuff, make the raw data public, which is a big part in this. Also, you touch on something which, especially in the epidemiologic community, is actually quite a controversy. Should we publish the code? There are many people say it's worthless if you don't have the data. I would say no, but there's also some resistance, as you point out. I think you should just, if you have the time, make everything publicly available. And another example is, if some of you have heard, the Open Safely system in Britain, where they created an API for their individual level registries, which I guess works kind of okay, but still there's quite the bottleneck that they have to check all analysis and validate the analysis. So I think, no, we are not there yet with making things public, especially with registry research, but I think we're getting there, and many of the younger forces in this are pushing for this. So I hope that in 5 years I can say yes.